Have you ever looked into a mirror and realized the person staring back at you is changing long before you ever noticed? I used to believe I knew exactly who I was. I thought I understood my limits, my identity, and the invisible line I would never cross. But all it took was one simple favor from my mom, one harmless afternoon, and one innocent laugh that neither of us expected to change everything. If someone had told me that my mother's makeover would become the beginning of an entirely different life for me, I would have laughed in their face. Looking back now, I wish I had paid attention to the little moments, because every huge transformation begins with something so small that it barely seems important. Mine started with a makeup brush. My mom had always loved beauty. She wasn't obsessed with expensive brands or fashionable trends, but she enjoyed experimenting with hairstyles, colors, and makeup techniques. After years of focusing on work and family, she finally decided to enroll in a professional beauty course. She wanted to improve her skills and maybe even start a small makeover business from home. I was happy for her. She deserved something that belonged only to her. One Saturday morning, she walked into my room carrying 3 shopping bags filled with cosmetics, wigs, dresses, jewelry, and beauty supplies. She smiled in a way that usually meant she needed my help. "I need a model." I laughed. "Good luck finding one." She looked directly at me. "I already did." I immediately refused. "No chance." She folded her arms. "You've got smooth skin, similar facial proportions to many women I practice on, and besides, I trust you." I shook my head so quickly that my neck almost hurt. "Absolutely not." She wasn't angry. She simply smiled. "1 hour."
No.
30 minutes.
No.
"I'll cook your favorite dinner." I hesitated. She noticed. "And dessert." I sighed. "You play dirty." She laughed. "So, yes." I finally nodded. "Only makeup. Nothing else." She smiled so brightly that I almost regretted agreeing before we even started. Her beauty room looked completely different after the new supplies arrived. Bright vanity lights surrounded a large mirror. Makeup palettes covered every shelf. There were curling irons, brushes, bottles, sprays, lipsticks, foundations, and things I couldn't even name. She sat me down. "Close your eyes." I obeyed. The soft touch of a makeup sponge felt strangely relaxing. Brushes moved gently across my face. She explained every product as she worked, almost like she was teaching a class. "This foundation evens the skin. This concealer hides shadows. A little contour changes the face. A little blush brings warmth." I listened without paying much attention. Almost an hour passed before she finally stepped back. "Open your eyes." I looked into the mirror. For several seconds, I honestly couldn't speak. I still looked like myself, but somehow softer. My jaw looked less sharp. My eyes appeared larger. My lips looked fuller. It wasn't dramatic. It was subtle, and somehow that made it even more surprising. I turned my head left, then right. "That's actually impressive." Mom grinned proudly. "I told you." I laughed nervously. If my friends saw this, I'd never hear the end of it. She smiled. "They won't. That should have been the end." It wasn't. The next day, she came back carrying another shopping bag. "I need to practice hairstyles." I stared at her. "You already had your practice. Today's lesson is wigs." I sighed.
Fine.
But only the wig. She placed a shoulder-length brown wig over my head. Then she adjusted it carefully. A few loose strands framed my face. Again, she pointed toward the mirror. The difference shocked me even more than the makeup. Without my usual hairstyle, my face somehow looked completely different. Mom tilted her head. "Interesting." "What?" "You photograph well." Before I could react.
Click.
She had taken a picture. "Delete that."
No.
"Mom. It's only for my beauty portfolio." "You promised." "I promised I wouldn't post it." I narrowed my eyes. "That's technically true." She laughed. "You really do have my sense of humor." Over the next 2 weeks, she continued practicing. Every session introduced something new. Eyebrows, eyeshadow, different lip colors, different wigs, color theory, face shapes, lighting, photography. Each time I repeated the same sentence. This is the last one. Each time she smiled. Just one more lesson. Somehow there was always one more lesson. One afternoon she asked something completely unexpected. I need to practice clothing coordination. I immediately answered.
No.
She held up a long cardigan. It's oversized.
No.
A sweater dress.
No.
It's just fashion. No. She looked disappointed. I can't finish the course without learning complete styling. I felt guilty. She noticed. You don't have to. That sentence somehow made me feel even worse. After several minutes I sighed. Only something casual. She hugged me before I could change my mind. 10 minutes later I walked out wearing an oversized cream sweater that reached almost to my knees. It didn't even look feminine. Just oversized. Mom smiled warmly.
See?
Comfortable. I had to admit, it actually was. She paired it with leggings because, according to her, that's how people normally wear these. I rolled my eyes, then looked in the mirror. Again, the image surprised me. Not because I looked exactly like a woman, but because I looked much closer than I ever imagined possible. Mom wasn't laughing anymore. She simply observed, "You naturally relax your shoulders." What? When you're comfortable. I guess. It changes your posture. I didn't even notice. Most people don't. She continued explaining little details about body language. How posture changes appearance. How confidence changes movement. How facial expressions affect perception. It was strangely educational. For the first time I realized that appearance wasn't just clothes or makeup. It was dozens of tiny habits working together. That evening she asked one final favor. I need before and after comparison photos. I sighed dramatically. 5 minutes. She smiled. 5 minutes. The photo session lasted almost 40. She apologized repeatedly. The lighting isn't right. The angle isn't right. The background isn't right. Eventually she finished. As I started removing the makeup, she quietly stopped me. Wait. What? Look. She showed me 2 photos side by side. The first was me that morning. The second had been taken just minutes ago. I couldn't believe they were the same person. The difference wasn't only makeup. My posture had changed. My smile looked different. Even my eyes seemed more relaxed. I stared at the screen longer than I expected. Mom gently asked, "What are you thinking?" I answered honestly. I don't know. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about those pictures. Not because I suddenly wanted to become someone else, but because I had discovered something unexpected. Transformation wasn't magic. It was technique. Tiny decisions layered one after another until the final result felt impossible. For the first time in my life, I became curious instead of uncomfortable. And curiosity, as I would soon learn, can become far more powerful than fear. The next morning I woke up to find a small gift box sitting outside my bedroom door. There was no note, only my name written in my mother's handwriting. When I opened it, my heart skipped a beat. Inside was a professional makeup brush set, and underneath it, a folded piece of paper that contained just one sentence. "If you're willing, I'd like you to become my final exam model." I picked up the note and read it again, hoping I had misunderstood it. My mother's final exam model? That sounded much more serious than our casual practice sessions. Until now, every makeover had stayed inside our house. It had always felt temporary, like helping someone learn to paint. But a final exam meant other people. It meant strangers. It meant stepping into a world I had never imagined entering. I carried the box downstairs where Mom was making breakfast, as if nothing unusual had happened. "You left this outside my door." She looked up and smiled. "I did." "You were serious?" "I was." "I thought you were joking." "I wasn't." I placed the note on the table. "You expect me to go to your beauty academy looking like—" I searched for the right word. "Your model?" She stayed calm. "I'm asking, not expecting. There'll be people there." "Yes." "They'll see me." "Yes." "What if they recognize me?" "They won't know who you are." I rubbed my forehead. "I don't know." She nodded instead of trying to convince me. You don't have to answer today. That surprised me. Normally, she loved persuading me. This time, she simply respected my hesitation, which somehow made the decision even harder. For the next 3 days, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every time I passed the hallway mirror, I remembered the photos she'd taken. I remembered how different posture, makeup, and hair could completely change someone's appearance. More than that, I remembered how fascinated I had been by the process itself. By Thursday evening, I walked into her beauty room. If I do this. She turned around immediately. There are conditions. She smiled but stayed silent. No photos outside your portfolio. Agreed. No posting anything online. Agreed. No telling relatives. I promise. And if I feel uncomfortable, we leave. She walked over and hugged me. We leave immediately. Saturday arrived much faster than I wanted. The academy occupied the second floor of a modern building filled with mirrors, salon chairs, and bright white lights. Students moved between stations carrying palettes, brushes, and hair tools. Some practiced on mannequins. Others worked on friends or family members. As soon as we entered, my confidence disappeared. I can't do this. Mom touched my shoulder. You still can say no. I looked around. Everyone seemed completely focused on their own work. Nobody cared about me. Nobody was staring. Nobody was laughing. I took a deep breath. Okay. Her instructor welcomed us with a warm smile. So this is your model? Mom nodded proudly. Yes. The instructor looked at me for a second before saying something unexpected. You have excellent facial symmetry. I blinked. Thank you. Mom tried not to laugh. The instructor continued. Symmetry makes makeup easier. You're actually helping your mother a lot. For the first time, I didn't feel embarrassed. I felt useful. The makeover lasted nearly 3 hours. This wasn't like the sessions at home. Every detail mattered. Foundation had to match perfectly. Eyeliner needed absolute precision. Contour had to be balanced from every angle. Hair had to complement the face. Accessories had to suit the outfit. The instructor occasionally stopped beside us, correcting tiny mistakes that I couldn't even notice. When everything was finished, Mom stepped back. I think we're done. The instructor walked over. She studied me quietly. Then she smiled. Excellent work. Mom's face lit up. You passed. You passed. She almost cried. Seeing how happy she was erased most of my nervousness. While she received feedback, I remained seated in front of the mirror. One of the other students walked past. She smiled. You look amazing. I automatically answered, thanks. Half a second later, I realized she hadn't recognized me as a man. She had simply complimented the finished makeover. It wasn't mockery. Mom leaned toward me. You okay? I nodded. I thought everything was over. She smiled softly. Sometimes the biggest fears exist only in our imagination. That sentence stayed with me long after the clients left. Over the next month, Mom's little home studio became surprisingly busy. Every evening I heard new conversations. Hair color, wedding makeup, graduation looks, professional headshots. The more I listened, the more fascinated I became by how beauty affected confidence. One client arrived looking nervous and exhausted. She left smiling so brightly that she almost looked like a different person. Another woman had recently finished chemotherapy and wanted eyebrows drawn naturally again. When Mom handed her the mirror, tears filled the woman's eyes. I finally recognized myself. Watching moments like that changed the way I thought about makeup. It wasn't always about looking prettier. Sometimes it helped people feel like themselves again. That realization completely shifted my perspective. One afternoon, Mom caught me organizing her makeup brushes after she'd finished cleaning. She smiled. I didn't ask you to do that. I know. You've learned which brushes go where. I've watched you enough. She laughed. I guess you have. Without thinking, I picked up one of the brushes. This one's for blending. She looked surprised. And this? A fluffy powder brush. And this? Angled contour. Her eyebrows lifted. You've been paying attention. I guess. She looked at me carefully. I could teach you. I laughed. You already are. A few days later, she handed me an old mannequin head. I bought a new one. So, you can practice. I looked at the mannequin. You seriously think I want to? I think you're curious. She wasn't wrong. That evening I watched several tutorial videos before attempting my first makeup application. It looked terrible. The eyeliner wasn't even close to matching. The lipstick spread outside the lines. The contour looked muddy. When Mom saw it, she burst into laughter. I know it's awful. She wiped tears from her eyes. It's not awful. It looks like abstract art. It looks like someone's first attempt. She adjusted the mannequin toward herself. Come here. For nearly an hour, she explained every mistake. Not by criticizing, by demonstrating. Less pressure. Smaller movements. Blend longer. Use less product. Trust the process. I repeated everything from the beginning. The second attempt looked slightly better. The third looked much better. By the fifth attempt, even I noticed improvement. Mom smiled proudly. You're learning faster than I expected. Really? You have patience. I never thought that was useful. It is. Weeks passed. Practicing slowly became part of my evenings. Sometimes I worked on mannequin heads. Sometimes I watched tutorials. Sometimes I simply observed Mom working with clients from across the room whenever they agreed to let students watch. I never expected beauty techniques to become interesting. Yet every week there was something new.
Color theory.
Face balance. Hair texture. Skin preparation. Photography lighting. Fashion coordination. The deeper I learned, the more I realized there was an entire world hidden behind what most people dismissed as just makeup. Then came the evening that changed everything again. Mom received a phone call from one of her former classmates. I only heard her side of the conversation. What? Tomorrow? Already? I don't know if I have anyone.
She glanced toward me.
Maybe. She hung up. I already knew. What happened? The academy is holding an advanced workshop. So, several students lost their models. I slowly shook my head.
No.
I haven't asked. You don't need to. She smiled apologetically. I honestly wasn't going to. I believed her. That made it harder. She started putting dishes away. I'll tell them no. Something about the disappointment in her voice bothered me. I stood silently for several seconds. What would I have to do? She turned around. Only sit there while advanced students practice. No runway.
No.
No audience. Just instructors. No photos. They're not allowed. I stared at the floor. Finally, okay. She blinked. You mean it? I'll help. The next afternoon we arrived at the academy again. This workshop felt much more professional than the beginner class. Students moved confidently. Professional photographers walked between stations. Experienced instructors examined every detail. I suddenly felt completely out of place. One instructor greeted Mom enthusiastically. I'm so glad you found a model. She introduced me simply as a volunteer. No further questions. No awkward attention. I relaxed slightly. Several students practiced different makeup styles throughout the day. Some specialized in bridal looks. Others focused on editorial fashion. Another demonstrated mature skin techniques. Each artist explained their choices while working. For the first time, I wasn't only being transformed. I was learning. Real learning. Every correction. Every technique. Every tiny adjustment. Hours passed surprisingly fast. Near the end of the workshop, one instructor gathered everyone together. We have time for one final exercise. She looked around the room. I'd like each model to walk across the studio so students can evaluate makeup under different lighting. My stomach dropped. Walk. Across the room? In front of everyone?
Mom looked at me.
You don't have to. Every instinct told me to refuse. But something inside me whispered another question. If you've already come this far, why stop now? I swallowed hard, then nodded. I'll do it. As I stepped toward the center of the brightly lit studio, dozens of eyes turned in my direction. For one terrifying second, the entire room fell completely silent. For one terrifying second, The silence felt endless. I could hear my own heartbeat louder than the quiet conversations that had filled the studio only moments earlier. Every instinct told me to lower my head and rush back to my chair, but I remembered something Mom had repeated during almost every practice session. People notice confidence before they notice perfection. I inhaled slowly, relaxed my shoulders, and took my first step. Then another. Then another. The room didn't erupt into laughter. Nobody whispered. Nobody pointed. Instead, I noticed something completely unexpected. The students weren't looking at me. They were studying the makeup. One instructor stepped closer. Excellent blending around the jawline. Another nodded. The hairstyle frames the face naturally. Someone else added. The lip color complements the overall balance. Their comments weren't about my identity. They were technical, professional, objective. When I reached the other side of the room, the lead instructor smiled. Thank you. That was all. The exercise continued with the next volunteer. Just like that, my biggest fear disappeared. On the drive home, I leaned back against the seat and laughed quietly. Mom looked over. What? I spent days imagining disaster. And it turned into a makeup lesson. She smiled. Our minds usually create scarier stories than reality. I looked out the window. I think you're right. A week later, something happened that neither of us expected. Mom received an email from the academy. One of the instructors had recommended her to assist at a regional beauty exhibition the following month. It wasn't a competition. It was a public event where artists demonstrated techniques, shared ideas, and connected with new clients. Mom read the email 3 times before handing me the phone. They actually invited me. That's amazing. She nodded excitedly. They also asked if I'd be bringing a demonstration model. I looked up immediately.
No.
She laughed. I wasn't asking. You looked at me. I know. You definitely looked at me. She smiled mischievously. I only have one reliable volunteer. I folded my arms. I'm retired. We'll see. Over the following weeks, business at home became busier than ever. Appointments filled the calendar. Mom was working harder than I'd ever seen. One evening, she accidentally dropped a box containing dozens of lipsticks onto the floor. Without thinking, I knelt down and started organizing them by shade. She watched me quietly. You've memorized the colors. I looked up. I guess I have. You arranged them exactly how professionals do. I blinked. I did. She smiled. Warm tones together. Cool tones together. Nudes, reds, pinks. I hadn't even realized I'd done it automatically. That small moment surprised both of us. The knowledge had quietly settled into my mind through months of observation. The exhibition was only 5 days away when disaster struck. Mom woke up with a high fever. At first she insisted it was just exhaustion. By afternoon she could barely stand. The doctor told her it wasn't serious, but she needed complete rest for several days. She sat on the couch staring at her phone. I have to cancel. I hated seeing her like that. She had worked so hard. You can always attend next year. I know. It isn't the end. She nodded slowly. Then her phone rang. It was one of the exhibition organizers. I could only hear parts of the conversation. Yes. I understand. I don't know. She glanced toward me. Actually, when she ended the call, she looked completely conflicted. What happened? They asked if someone could represent my work. I frowned. What does that mean? They've already printed the schedule. So, they don't want an empty demonstration station. I already knew where this was going.
No. She sighed.
I agree. I blinked. You do. You're not ready. I relaxed. Then she added quietly. But I knew that word would change everything. The organizer asked whether my assistant could attend instead. I stared at her. Assistant. She smiled awkwardly. I may have mentioned that you've been helping me. I hand you brushes. You've done much more than that. I organize lipstick. You know makeup terminology. I watched videos. You understand skin preparation. I listened. You've practiced. On mannequin heads. She looked at me carefully. I never realized how much you'd learned until today. Neither had I. That realization made the room strangely quiet. The following evening, one of Mom's instructors came to visit. She wanted to check on Mom before the exhibition. While they talked downstairs, I stayed in the beauty room cleaning brushes. A few minutes later, I heard footsteps behind me. The instructor stood in the doorway. "I heard you've been helping." "A little." She looked around the neatly organized workspace. "You've labeled every drawer. It makes things easier." She picked up a brush. "Which one is this?" "A tapered blending brush." She selected another. "And this?" "Precision concealer." "Another." "Foundation buffing." She smiled. "Interesting." Then she walked toward the mannequin heads. I suddenly remembered the practice makeup I'd done the previous night. I expected her to laugh. Instead, she studied it quietly. "Did you do this?" I nodded nervously. "It's only practice." She continued examining every angle. Finally, she turned toward me. "How long have you been learning?" "I've never really," she interrupted gently. No false modesty. I thought for a moment. "About 4 months." She looked genuinely surprised. "4 months?" I nodded. She smiled. "You've developed good habits." "I still make plenty of mistakes." "So does everyone." She placed the mannequin back on the table. "Skill isn't the absence of mistakes." "What is it?" "Knowing how to correct them." I thought about that sentence for a long time. Before leaving, she paused at the door. "The exhibition organizer isn't looking for perfection." I looked at her. "They're looking for passion." After she left, I stood alone in front of the mirror. I remembered the nervous person who had refused even a little foundation. The one who couldn't imagine wearing a wig. The one who believed helping with one makeup lesson would be the end of it. Now I was standing in the same room, surrounded by brushes, palettes, wigs, and mannequin heads that no longer felt unfamiliar. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. It had happened one tiny decision at a time. One lesson, one favor, one conversation, one challenge, one unexpected step after another. I smiled at my own reflection. For the first time, I wasn't wondering whether I had changed. I knew I had. The only question left was how far that change was about to go. The next morning, while Mom was still resting, my phone vibrated with a message from an unknown number. I opened it. It was from the exhibition organizer. "Your mother spoke very highly of you. If you're willing to help, we'd love to meet you before the event. No pressure, but we think you might surprise yourself." I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the reply button. Without realizing it, I caught my reflection in the dark phone screen. And for the first time, I wasn't trying to see the old version of myself anymore. I kept staring at the message until the screen went dark. My thumb hovered over the reply button, but I couldn't make myself press it. Accepting would mean stepping even farther into a world that had started as a simple favor for my mom. Declining would mean watching her lose an opportunity she had worked months to earn. I walked downstairs with the phone still in my hand. Mom was sitting on the couch wrapped in a blanket, looking much better than the day before but still tired. "Another message?" she asked. I handed her the phone. She read it slowly, then looked back at me. "You don't owe me anything." "I know. I mean it. I know. If you say no, I'll call them right now." I believed her. That made the decision even harder. I sat beside her in silence for almost a minute before finally asking, "If you were me, what would you do?" She smiled gently. "I can't answer that." "Why not?" "Because this stopped being about helping me a long time ago." Her words caught me completely off guard. "What do you mean?" She reached for my hand. "The first few weeks, you were doing me a favor. After that, I noticed something." "What?" "You stopped counting how many times I asked." I frowned. "You started asking your own questions." I thought about it. She was right. Instead of saying, "Are we finished yet?" I had started asking things like, "Why does this foundation work better? How do you choose this hairstyle? Why is this color warmer?" Somewhere along the way, curiosity had quietly replaced reluctance. Mom smiled. "I watched you fall in love with learning. Not with dressing up. Not with attention. Learning." I hadn't realized there was a difference until she said it. That afternoon, I replied to the organizer. I'll come to the meeting. Within minutes, they answered with the address and time. The meeting itself lasted less than half an hour. The organizer explained the layout of the exhibition, the demonstration schedule, and the expectations. You won't be judged. Good. You'll simply demonstrate techniques while explaining the process. I've never taught anyone. You don't have to teach. So what do I do? Just describe what's happening. That sounded much easier than I expected. As the meeting ended, one of the senior artists stopped me near the exit. You must be the assistant everyone keeps talking about. I looked behind me to see if she meant someone else. She laughed. Yes, you. I'm not really an assistant. Maybe not officially. She smiled warmly. But you've earned quite a reputation already. I blinked. What reputation? Your mother's. That answer surprised me. She never stops talking about how patient you are. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. No one had ever described me that way before. The exhibition arrived faster than I expected. The convention hall was enormous. Bright lights, professional booths, photography stations, hair competitions, cosmetic brands, beauty schools. Everywhere I looked, people were creating something. Instead of feeling out of place, I felt fascinated. The organizer greeted me immediately. We're glad you came. He pointed toward a demonstration area already prepared with mirrors, lights, and salon chairs. My name wasn't on the sign. Mom's was. That made me smile. I wasn't replacing her. I was representing her. Before the demonstrations began, I called Mom. She answered on the second ring. You made it. I did. Nervous? Terrified? She laughed softly. You'll be wonderful. I hope you're right. I've never been more certain. The first demonstration involved basic skin preparation. A volunteer model sat in the chair while I explained every step exactly as Mom had taught me. Cleansing helps remove oils. Hydration creates a smoother base. Primer depends on skin type. I expected my voice to shake. Instead, the words flowed naturally. People gathered around the booth. Not a huge crowd. Maybe 15 or 20 people. Still more than enough to make me nervous. One woman raised her hand. What would you recommend for combination skin? For a split second, I panicked. Then I remembered one of Mom's lessons. If you don't know something, don't pretend. I smiled. There are several approaches, but I'd rather not guess. Skin should always be assessed individually. The senior artist beside me nodded approvingly. Excellent answer. After the demonstration ended, she leaned closer. You know why that impressed me? Why? You respected the client more than your ego. That compliment meant more than I expected. Later that afternoon, another unexpected challenge appeared. One of the scheduled demonstrators became stuck in traffic. The organizer hurried over. We need someone to fill 20 minutes. I looked around. There are lots of professionals here. They're all busy. He hesitated. Would you be willing? My heart skipped. Me? You've already handled one session beautifully. I've never done a full demonstration. You won't be alone. The senior artist smiled. I'll stand beside you. I swallowed hard. Okay. Within minutes, I found myself standing in front of nearly 50 people. Far more than before. Bright lights pointed directly toward the stage. Every pair of eyes seemed focused on me. For a brief moment, I almost forgot how to breathe. Then I remembered something Mom had once whispered while adjusting a wig. Don't perform. Connect. I smiled. My name is... I paused. For some reason, saying my own name felt strangely difficult. Not because I wanted another one, but because I realized the audience wasn't here to judge me. They were here to learn. I finished introducing myself and began explaining how subtle makeup techniques could completely change the balance of a face without looking unnatural. As I demonstrated blending techniques, I noticed people taking notes. Actual notes. Someone asked about contour placement. Another asked about brush pressure. Another asked about choosing foundation shades. The questions kept coming. I answered everything I genuinely knew and admitted what I didn't. Instead of losing confidence, the audience seemed to trust me even more. When the demonstration ended, they applauded. It wasn't thunderous. It wasn't dramatic. But it was real. I stepped off the stage feeling lighter than I had all day. The senior artist smiled proudly. You've got something many professionals struggle to develop. What? People believe you. Those 4 words stayed with me. People believe you. Not because I was perfect. Not because I knew everything. Because I was honest. As I packed away the brushes, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Mom. How did it go? I smiled and typed only 4 words. Better than I imagined. A few seconds later, 3 appeared as she started typing a reply. But before her message arrived, someone gently tapped me on the shoulder. I turned around. Standing behind me was a woman wearing an exhibitor badge from one of the largest beauty academies in the region. She smiled and held out a business card. Then she asked a question that I never, ever expected to hear. Have you ever considered becoming a professional makeup artist yourself? I looked at the business card, then back at her, convinced she had mistaken me for someone else. I'm sorry, are you talking to me? She smiled. I think you've got the wrong person. I don't think so. She introduced herself as the education director of a respected beauty academy. She explained that she had watched most of my demonstration from the back of the audience. I wasn't evaluating your makeup, she said. You weren't?
No.
Then what were you watching? You. That answer confused me even more. I don't understand. She folded her hands. Technical skills can be taught. I nodded. Confidence grows with experience. Probably. But patience. She smiled. Patience is much harder to teach. I stood there without knowing how to respond. She continued. You never rushed your model. You answered questions honestly. You listened before speaking. And every time someone asked something, you made them feel comfortable instead of embarrassed. I hadn't realized anyone had noticed those things. She handed me the card. If you ever decide to study professionally, call me. I accepted it politely. Thank you. There is no pressure. She smiled one last time before walking away. I slipped the card into my pocket, assuming that would be the end of it. I had no idea it was only the beginning. When I got home that evening, Mom was feeling much better. She was waiting in the kitchen with 2 mugs of hot chocolate. I've been dying to hear everything. I laughed. You sound healthier already. I feel healthier. We sat together at the table while I told her about every part of the exhibition. The demonstrations, the audience, the questions, the applause, the invitation. When I finally showed her the business card, she became unusually quiet. She turned it over slowly. I know her. You do. Very well. Is she important? Mom laughed softly. Very. I suddenly became nervous again. So, was she just being polite? Mom looked directly into my eyes.
No.
How do you know? She never hands out her personal card unless she's genuinely impressed. I leaned back in my chair. I don't even know if I want to become a makeup artist. She nodded. You don't have to decide today. I've never imagined doing anything like this. I know. You've always known me as... She interrupted gently. I know exactly who you've always been. Her answer felt strangely comforting. She wasn't telling me I had become someone else. She was telling me I had discovered another side of myself. There was an important difference. Life slowly settled into a new routine. Mom's business continued growing. I returned to my regular job during the day. Evenings were different now. Sometimes I helped organize appointments. Sometimes I cleaned equipment. Sometimes I practiced techniques on mannequin heads. Sometimes I simply watched. Months earlier, every makeover had felt awkward. Now they felt familiar.
Not ordinary.
Just familiar. One evening, while organizing old storage boxes, I found the very first photo Mom had taken of me. The one from our first makeup practice. I smiled without meaning to. The makeup looked uneven. The wig sat slightly crooked. The lighting was terrible. Mom walked into the room carrying folded towels. What are you smiling at? I held up the picture.
This.
She laughed immediately. Oh no. You remember? I remember how nervous you were. I thought my life was over. You refused to look in the mirror. I did. And then, she smiled. You wouldn't stop looking. We both laughed. I placed the old picture beside one taken at the exhibition. The difference wasn't just the makeup. It wasn't even the styling. It was my expression. In the first picture, I looked tense, uncertain, and uncomfortable. In the second, I looked calm, confident, present. Mom noticed it too. You've changed. I know.
No.
She gently tapped the newer photo. Look at your eyes. I looked carefully. She was right. Fear had quietly disappeared. Not completely, but enough. Several weeks later, Mom received another invitation. This time, it was for a charity event offering free makeovers to women preparing for job interviews after long periods of unemployment. She accepted immediately. I'll need help. I smiled. I figured. The event turned out to be unlike anything I had experienced before. Nobody cared about trends. Nobody asked about expensive products. These women simply wanted confidence before taking another chance on life. One woman hadn't attended an interview in nearly 10 years. Her hand shook while sitting in the salon chair. I don't even recognize myself anymore, she admitted. Mom looked toward me. You talked to her. What? Go ahead. I sat beside the woman. I get nervous too. She laughed weakly. You? More than you'd believe. She looked skeptical. You seem so confident. I smiled. That's because you're seeing the version of me that came after a lot of practice. Her shoulders relaxed a little. We spent nearly 30 minutes talking while Mom worked. When the makeover was finished, the woman looked into the mirror. She didn't cry. She smiled. A quiet, genuine smile. I think. She touched her cheek gently. I can do this. Watching that moment affected me more deeply than any applause ever had. For the first time, I fully understood why Mom loved this work so much. Beauty wasn't about hiding who someone was. At its best, it helped people feel ready to face the world again. On the drive home, neither of us spoke for a while. Finally, Mom broke the silence. You understand now. I nodded. I do. What changed? I looked out the window. I used to think makeovers changed faces. And now, I think they often change how people see themselves. Mom smiled. I couldn't have said it better. That night, before going to bed, I opened the drawer where I'd placed the Academy director's business card. For weeks, I had ignored it. Now, I picked it up again. I read the name, the phone number, the email address. Then I turned the card over. On the back, written in neat blue ink, was a sentence I hadn't noticed before. Talent opens doors. Kindness keeps them open. I read it 3 times. Then I smiled. Maybe the biggest transformation in my life had never been about makeup. Maybe it had never been about clothes. Maybe Mom's makeover had gone much further because it had changed the way I looked at other people and the way I looked at myself. The next morning, I picked up my phone, opened a new email, and placed my fingers on the keyboard. I took one deep breath. Then I began typing my reply to the Academy. I still didn't know exactly where this new path would lead, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid to find out.